Hello, everyone. I'm Anessa Goodwin of Key Performance Ideas, and I'd like to welcome you today to our webinar, Hyperion Planning Approvals, Managing the Budget Process, presented today by Suzie Young. Suzie Young is an Oracle System 11 certified specialist and has over 15 years of accounting and finance experience. She has led and participated in over 30 successful Hyperion implementations, including designing and implementing Hyperion Planning, S-Base, and reporting at leading global companies. Suzie has also developed custom end-user training documentation and has led several classroom training sessions. A recognized thought leader, Suzie has presented at Oracle user group conferences and delivered webinars for major modules of Hyperion Planning. Thank you, Suzie, for joining us today.
Thank you, Anessa. And I want to thank all of you for taking the time out of your day to join us. Today I'm going to talk about Hyperion Planning's approval process and how it can help your organization manage and improve the budget cycle. Some of the items we'll take a look at today include what is approval and what does the approvals functionality do, how to set up the budget process. Do you want bottoms up or top down? We'll take a look at what functionality is added at each step of the budget process: plan, promote, review, and approve. And we'll also look at the reporting functionality. Users can track where the budgets are and the status. After we're done with that, we'll have some time to take your questions, and then we'll wrap up. Planning Approvals is part of the Hyperion Planning application and is designed to help manage the budget process. It is also referred to as workflow or process management. Not only is it a tool for users to submit their budget, but it provides useful functionality at each phase of the process, while users are inputting their budget data, when users are promoting the budget, and during the review and approval. It also allows for multiple levels of review and approval within an organization, or in the simplest form, can be used as a tool for checking who has completed their budget. Essentially, distinct planning units are created with assigned reviewers and owners. These planning units are then submitted for review and approval. You define a promotion path. For example, it can begin with an analyst who promotes to a manager and then to a director and so on. You may be thinking, so why would I want to use this? First of all, it can help re-engineer an FP&A-centric model and shift ownership of the budget to the people who are actually responsible. Rather than the FP&A group entering the numbers for end users, the department users at different levels can enter, submit, and review the budget, while FP&A can provide oversight or final approval. Along with the above, controls can be added to guide users to more accurate budgets, which eliminates review time when the first pass is a better one. For those of you who have seen the first generation of process management, you may be thinking this isn't the tool for you. However, Oracle has made some really great improvements that make this functionality truly useful now. Let me catch you up on some of the highlights. First of all, the first generation of approvals, the original functionality included basic submission capability, and the planning units were limited to just a combination of one scenario, one version, and an entity. Planning unit annotations and audit trail, which included time date stamps, were available, and the locking of the planet unit after submission. Users had to select a user to whom to promote. Now let's take a look at some of the new or improved features. There's flexibility in setting up the planning units. There's data control options, graphical views, dynamic promotion paths, and all in all, more bells and whistles. Now that we've discussed what approvals does, and I gave you a high-level look at some of the features, let's tie that into the actual budgeting process. we think about a typical budget cycle, we can break it into 3 phases: planning, promoting, review, and approval. Planning is when your users enter the data, promotion when your users are sending their budget for review, and review and approval, which is the sign-off and final submission. During the plan phase, we have the following functionality. We have data form validations. So you can change the promotion path if a data control fails. For example, let's say you want to limit the number of new hires per department. You could set up a validation rule to change the promotion path if the number of new hires is, let's say, greater than 5. So if a department plans for 10 new hires, then when the planning unit is promoted, it gets routed to the HR department for approval rather than the next reviewer. Another example of a data validation is not allowing promotion. For example, if you want to restrict operating expenses not to exceed the prior year's operating expenses, and a department tries to do that, you could put a stop on the promotion process, and the end user has to correct the data prior to promotion. Another feature during the plan phase is cell comments as well as supporting details. Users can put in justifications at the input cell level for the plan numbers. The cell comments are viewable to all reviewers and approvers during the budget process, which can help eliminate time spent emailing and calling back and forth to get explanations. Same for supporting details. This feature allows users to build up the amount by account. For example, let's say you need to plan airfare expense. Instead of just inputting $1,000 for airfare, you could input 2 trips to New York City at $500 apiece, which would then tie up to the $1,000. And again, supporting detail is viewable by all reviewers and can help eliminate some of the questions. Cell comments and supporting details both can be shown in Hyperion financial reports. During the promote phase, we have the ability to enter planning unit annotations. For example, when I submit my budget, the reviewer can say, oh, hey, COGS looks a little high compared to last year, please adjust, and send that whole unit back to me, and I can see the annotations. These annotations are saved, and they travel with the planning unit for all reviewers and owners to see. There are also controls checked. So when a planning unit is being promoted, a validation is run to ensure that all of the data validations have been met. And users are shown if this validation passes or fails. If it fails, then they have to go and fix the issue. And then the audit trail. So as planning units are promoted from user to reviewer and so on, the system is logging the time date stamp of each of these actions taken. These can be used during audit reviews if necessary. And then during the final review and approve, some of the functionality is updating the promotion path. So the path can change based on a control or out-of-office delegations. Avoid bottlenecks having users create rules for any planning units they will have while they are out. We'll take a look at the specifics on this one in a little bit. And then reporting on status, which gives visibility into the status of each planning unit. Setting up approvals. Let's take a look at how to design and set up your approvals process. The first step is creating the planning unit hierarchy. You are able to create multiple hierarchies, not just the traditional scenario version entity combination. The first step is to give your planning unit hierarchy a name. So in this example, I have called it Entity Approvals. And if you'd like, you can add a description. The next selection is to enable approvals, and your choices are all, none, or custom. If you select all, that means all planning units would be included in this process. If you select none, it includes none by default, and you have to add them in after the fact. Or custom, which is you define which planning units to include. The next selection is the approvals template. There are 3 choices for this. There's bottoms up, which means data is entered at the bottom or leaf level, and then the review starts at the bottom as well. So an analyst inputs their budget, and then the review process starts with the analyst, and they promote up. There's also a distributed approvals template. Again, the data is entered at the bottom or leaf level, but the review starts at the top. So the owner of that planning unit starts the review, passes it down, and then when it gets down to the analyst can pass it back up. And then there is a free form, which doesn't follow a specific promotional path. Users can promote to anyone who has access to that planning unit. And then you'll also need to define the scenario and version to which each planning unit is available. Using a secondary dimension, you can now add another level of granularity to the process, no longer restricted to just entities. In this example, the entities in the Chicago region will be promoted not only by the entity, but by the department. If we take a look at the selections, you'll see the first column is enabled. So I'm saying I want to apply a secondary dimension to my Chicago entity. And the dimension column tells the system which dimension is going to be that secondary dimension. So right here, we're looking at department. Now, the cool thing is you can use relationship functions. So I can select total department as a member from my department dimension, and I can use relative generation to include the members. I've selected auto include, so anytime a member is added or deleted from the department dimension, those members will be automatically included in the planning units. The next step in setting up your planning hierarchy is assigning reviewers and owners. So on this tab, you will be defining what the promotion path for each planning unit will look like. Notice in the first column, we see Chicago along with each of the departments. So now it's showing us the combination of our entity and department. We have Chicago Executive, Chicago Finance, Chicago IT, Sales, and Marketing. For each of those planning units, we can define an owner and a reviewer. The owner can be a user or a group. The one thing to remember is that even though it can be a group, only one person can own a planning unit at a time. So anybody within the group can be the owner, but only one at a time. Then you define a reviewer. Again, this can be a user or a group, and you could have multiple reviewers set up. So in my example, I only have one reviewer per planning unit. However, this could be 5 levels deep. So if you go from an analyst to a manager to a director to a vice president, but could all be listed in the reviewer column. And the promotional path follows the order that the names appear in that column. The promotional path. So this icon, if you click on it, will show you a graphic representation of the promotion process for this specific entity and department combination. And then lastly, the notify users column. So if you have people in the organization who are not necessarily going to be reviewers or owners, but you want to notify them when the budgets have been submitted or reviewed or rejected, you can add their names here and they will be notified as well. Here's an example of the graphic from the promotion path icon we looked at on the last slide. So this is an example for the Chicago IT planning unit. Up at the top, you'll see which planning unit we're looking at. So we're looking at Chicago IT. Sean Shug is the first step in that process, and he's the reviewer. And then the next step goes right to Angel Vertrano, who's the owner. And if we had, 5 levels deep here, you'd see 5 different boxes of where it is. Data validation rules. So as a reminder, data validations are set up by the administrator, and they're created in the data forms, so your web forms. There's 2 types. There's changing a promotional path. So if the data entered does not meet a certain criteria, the planning unit can be routed to a different reviewer. And that ties back to that HR example where they exceeded the number of allowed new hires, so the planning unit had to go be reviewed by HR. And then there's the do not allow promotion type. So users have to correct the issue before the system will allow them to promote to the next reviewer. Hyperion has created an out-of-office function. It's a great new feature, and if you're going to be out of the office, you can automatically tell the system how to handle incoming planning units. So you can choose to promote, reject, delegate to somebody else, or submit. And then you can also select the next owner. So first you select your action, then you can select the next owner, and then you can even enter an annotation to be sent automatically. So if you receive a planning unit while you are out, you could delegate it to another reviewer and then write an annotation that'll say, hey, I'm out of the office this week. Can you please review this in my absence? This is great because it helps avoid bottlenecks. It keeps the process moving. Some other functionality that's included are email notifications. So you can configure the system to let users, reviewers, owners, other interested parties be notified whenever an action is taken on a planning unit, if it's promoted, if it's been rejected. And then there's also reporting. So administrators and users can run out-of-the-box reports are available that show the status and current owner of each planning unit. And one other very important control that I haven't specifically mentioned is that once the review process starts and a user promotes their budget, they are no longer the owner of that planning unit, which means they are locked out from making any changes to the numbers. They can still view the data, they can still run reports on the data. However, the ability to change the numbers once they've submitted it is gone. Only the current owner of a planning unit can change the data during the process. So let's look at how you would get started using this tool. Do you want to take advantage of the new functionality? Here are some things to think about. So organization and process impact. Will the functionality satisfy your needs? And how can you customize and align the tool to your current process? What processes can and should be re-engineered? This goes back to how we were talking, and oftentimes the model is the FP&A group. It's just calling people, getting information, and typing in the data and submitting the data. They're not the owners of the departmental budgets. You can push the tool out to the departmental users and have them do the input and have the FP&A do the review and analysis. How can corporate FP&A use it? What level of accountability can be placed on the users? So you can tie this into deadlines on the task list in planning. And it provides transparency into where people are in the process. And how will the new processes impact business controls? These are just some of the things that you'll want to think about if you'd like to start using this functionality. That's all I had for today.
To ask a question, go to Viewing Desktop at the top of your screen and select Chat to ask Suzie a question.
I have a question. If users haven't submitted their budgets by a deadline, is there a way to just grab them? Yes, absolutely. the administrator can take an action on a planning unit at any point in the process. So he or she can straight out approve a planning unit, or they can promote it on behalf of a user to the appropriate person. Right, I have another question. What if something changes after a budget has been approved? Is there a way to let the users back in? Yeah, definitely. If the administrator takes an action, they can take like a reject and push it back out to the users so the user can make a change and then it can flow back up through the approval process. Or if you want to completely wipe out the record of that first submission, they could restart that planning unit. And then that would delete any of the annotations that were sent along with the planning unit. Then we have a question about what version of Hyperion do you have to be on in order to use the new approval features. I believe the newest version that has this is 11.1.2. It may be a version right before that, but it definitely is 11. We have another question. Our company doesn't have a formal review process. Would we need to use this? No, you are not required to use the approval functionality. However, I think it still can be useful. At a minimum, when it comes time to complete the budget and get the package ready, everybody's scrambling to find out who's final. I think it's a very good tool as a checklist, right? You can have the user submit it directly to the administrator, and the administrator has a very easy to follow checklist of who's submitted and who hasn't. There is a question, do you have to choose a descendant level or can you choose different levels? I'm assuming that this applies to the secondary dimension. You don't have to use descendants. You can cherry pick the members as well. So if you only wanted to do a subset of accounts, let's say you have like a sales plan that wants to be submitted prior to the full plan going out, you can just have the sales entities submit the sales accounts, and that can go up.
Thank you, Suzie. And thank you all for joining us today for the webinar, Hyperion Planning Approvals, Managing the Budget Process. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. Suzie and Greg's contact information is displayed on your screen.